Hello, everyone, and welcome to the July Consulting webinar from CDI. My name is Michael Mathis. I am the Client Services Director, and I will be your presenter for A Long Goodbye, No More, Offboarding Your Employees. If you need help during today's webinar, or you have any questions, please post your questions in the questions box at any time. We do have staff monitoring the questions, and we will have time at the end of today's webinar to answer any questions that there may be. If you need help at any time, you can raise your hand, and someone will be able to assist you with anything that you may need. For example, if the audio or video goes out during the webinar today. Some tips for success: make sure that you take good notes and screenshots during the webinar. I like to notate how far into the webinar we are so that I can easily go back and find where in the webinar we were. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We love to hear all of your questions, and we will have time at the end of the webinar today to answer any questions that you may have. Please complete the survey after today's webinar. We love to hear your feedback and any ideas that you may have for a future webinar. And please remember that this webinar will be recorded and available on the CDI YouTube channel within a couple days of today's webinar. A long goodbye, no more. Offboarding your employees. The intended audience for today's webinar are Laserfiche administrators and Laserfiche power users. And this webinar is applicable to both Laserfiche self-hosted environments and Laserfiche cloud environments. If you're neither an administrator nor a Laserfiche power user, please stay in today's webinar as there will be plenty of valuable information for everyone. During today's webinar, we're going to use Laserfiche Forms to build a list of offboarding tasks, generate offboarding paperwork, and file the documentation to the repository. We will automate offboarding tasks with Laserfiche Forms and workflow. And we will go over a live demonstration of everything that we cover today. HR offboarding is often a long and complicated process with many things to keep track of. Oftentimes, this is going to span across many departments within the organization. For example, our HR team will need to move I-9 and personnel files into the inactive folder. We'll need to go over the non-disclosure agreement. Our facilities team will need to, our IT team would need to deactivate their account and network access. We'll need to remove personal credit cards, obtain. Wow, there is just so much going on in this process, and it is just absolutely terrible to keep track of manually with pen and paper and following up across departments. No more. Using Laserfiche Forms, we can automate and track all of our offboarding processes in one central location. Forms reporting is available to see which tasks are active, which tasks have been completed, and how long it takes to complete each task on average. We will automatically have our paperwork filed to our Laserfiche repository. We can automate updating the metadata and location of the employee record, and much more. A quick overview of our process today. We'll be assigning tasks to multiple users. We'll be using the parallel gateway to assign these tasks in parallel, so multiple departments can work on their tasks at the same time. We'll use a timer event and email service task to automate email reminders to employees that have tasks pending. and will automatically store records of offboarding to our Laserfiche repository in the correct employment folder. Reviewing task automation, we will be able to manage lookup tables that contains data for our employee lookups. We can use an exclusive gateway and the rules service task within Laserfiche Cloud to update our lookup table. For self-hosted users, this can be accomplished using a SQL database and Laserfiche workflow to update that SQL database table. For our automation, we will also run a Laserfiche workflow using the run workflow service task to automate a lot of our offboarding processes, such as updating metadata and moving folders to the correct location within the repository. With Laserfiche, we can do even more with automation. Laserfiche Workflow provides the ability to automate repository tasks, as well as interact with external systems. We can use Laserfiche Forms to create dynamic task lists from lookup tables. We can pre-fill our form data using lookups. And we can also take our automation even further using various integrations from Laserfiche and CDI, such as ShareFile, DocuSign, Dynamics 365, or Salesforce. Laserfiche Cloud also provides their iPaaS connectors for Boomi and MuleSoft. Now that we've taken a quick look at what we're going to be building today, we will move over to Laserfiche Cloud and start building our process. Here I have our Laserfiche Forms process pulled up, and it looks a lot scarier than it really is. So to start, our HR manager is going to kick off the process by filling out the form. We will save that offboarding form to our Laserfiche repository. We are going to send out our offboarding tasks to the various users responsible for different departments. For example, our HR team will have their offboarding checklist assigned to someone from HR. With our our timer catch event, we're able to wait for a certain date and time or after a certain duration. So for example, after 1 day, we will then move on to the next activity, or we can also wait based on a variable. So we can say so many days after or before a variable within our form. We can also repeat this timer. So we can send out an automated email reminder every 1 day after this task is assigned to ensure that the task gets completed by the deadline. We're going to discard these changes. Using the send email service task, we can send an email reminder to the appropriate department with our offboarding tasks reminder as the subject. And we're also going to attach the form using our current process data and send the form that's assigned to this user. That way they'll have a little more information available to them in the email. After each user completes their tasks, we're going to then save the checklist to the Laserfiche repository. And once all of our tasks are complete, we are then going to assign a task to review the completed checklists by HR. And we can see here that our review of completed checklist does not have a reminder on this. We can easily add in this reminder by right-clicking on our activity and attaching a timer event. I'm going to move this to the side. In our timer event, we are going to wait for a variable, and we will say 2 days before the employee end date, we are going to send an email. We click and drag, we get our option for tasks and sub-processes, and we will add an email service task. Send a reminder to HR. This is going to be going to use our initiator. If I can spell initiator, process initiator. Our subject is going to be reminder HR offboarding completion. We can attach our form using the completed checklist review, and we will enter in our email reminder information. Must be completed before. Here we're going to insert our end date. So in our email here, we're saying urgent. Let's highlight this because it is very urgent. HR completion must be completed before the employment end date that is being entered into our Laserfiche form. When our email is sent, we are going to come back to our task here. And let's add a due date of 1 day before the employee end date. So our task is going to be urgent and due 1 day before the employee end date at 5 p.m. Pacific time. If we save our changes and publish, we will run through a quick demonstration of our form before we add in our automations to automate some of these offboarding tasks. So here we'll start our process and enter in our employee ID. We have a lookup using Laserfiche Forms that's going to run to pre-fill as much information as we can. So we've pre-filled the first name, last name, position, department, etc. If we take a look at our Laserfiche form for our employee offboarding, this is our starting form here. Under lookup rules, here we're going to be performing a lookup table query against our employee lookup in our employee offboarding list. And this is going to say when our employee ID matches with the input parameter of employee ID, we can configure the information that we're going to pre-fill. If we look at our table, we can see that we don't have the manager information in line, but we do have our manager ID available. So by adding in a second lookup, we can match our manager ID field with the employee ID input to find the manager's information to pre-fill that manager first name, last name, and email address easily. If we move back to our Laserfiche form, we're going to continue filling this out, and we will say, no, we do not have any personal devices. We do not need an exit interview. We don't need a requisition. And here we're going to say Teresa is being promoted from, let's go with Andrew actually. So Andrew is going to be promoted from account manager to an account executive. And his future manager is going to be Sally Sales. The last day in this position is going to be the 28th of July. And here we don't have any additional comments that we need to provide, so we will submit our form. After our form is submitted, we will have our various user tasks in our inbox for our HR offboarding processes. For today's webinar, I have everything assigned to myself. Typically, this is going to be assigned out to the appropriate department heads or appropriate teams to perform these tasks, but that makes for a much more difficult webinar. So here we'll go through our tasks one by one, and we can complete our checklist, submit. We're going to complete our HR checklist. We'll complete our facilities checklist. And before we finish our knowledge transfer form, let's take a look at our Laserfiche repository. And here we have Andrew's employee folder. Inside of our position management folder, we have our promotion on 7/28/2023. And within this folder, we can see we have our employee offboarding document, our HR checklist, our IT checklist, and our facilities checklist. All of our information is automatically pre-filled from our Save to Repository task. If we take a closer look at these tasks, we can see we are filing our document to HR, active employees, first name, last name, position management, and the type of attrition and employee end date. Looking at our template fields, if we configure our fields, we can assign a template, pre-fill all of our information in that template using variables from our Laserfiche form submission. In this case, all of this information is pre-filled for us. And we could also add or remove additional fields if we needed to save additional information that is not part of this template. If we go back to our task list and complete our knowledge transfer, we can then see in our promotion folder, when we refresh, we have our knowledge transfer form that has been submitted. And here is our document preview. Now that all of our departmental tasks have been completed, our process will move on to review of our completed checklists by HR. If we look at our tasks, We can see here we have our new task for review completed checklists by HR. And finally, we will submit our form to complete our process. At this point, there are still a lot of very manual tasks. We need to go into our folder. And if we were, say, terminating Andrew instead of promoting him, we would then need to move Andrew's folder to the past employees folder. We would need to make sure any records management properties are set, etc. If we go back to our business process in our offboarding completion, or before our review, actually, we will add in a new stage. And let's move some of these over to completion. So by breaking this apart into separate stages, we are then able to track more information in our forms reporting for these various stages. We'll rename our stage 3 to be offboarding automation. And next we are going to add in our gateway decisions for if our user is promoted or transferred, we need to update our data in our lookup table. So we would change our position and department. If our employee is terminated, quitting, or otherwise moving on from our company, we can then delete the record from this lookup table so that this employee no longer shows up in our lookups. Going back to our forms process, we are going to use an exclusive gateway because we want to do an either or rather than a parallel of running all of our branches. So first we will run our rules task to remove our employee data. We also want another rule service task added in, and this will update our employee data. From our exclusive gateway, we are going to run both of our branches, move our little notation over. And finally, we want to add in an inclusive gateway to wait for these tasks to finish. If we continue to configure our rules here, we are going to use a lookup table query. We could send a web request if we have an external system that has a web API available. We can run a script or a data query to perform additional automation within our forms process when using Laserfiche Cloud. With our lookup table query, we are going to run our remove employee lookup query rule. If we open up our rule and take a quick look here, we are running against our webinar employee data. And we are going to be deleting where our employee ID column equals the employee ID provided. We will need to add an input value to pass in the employee ID. And here our value is going to be from a variable. And we will add in our employee ID. We will similarly configure our update employee data rule to perform a lookup query. And this is going to be the update query. Again, we'll take a quick look at our rule. So we're going to be updating our webinar employee data table. We'll be able to update our department and position where the employee ID equals the employee ID provided. And back to our process designer, we're going to add our input variables. And here we'll select all of these to update them. So this is going to be our future department, our employee ID, and finally our position, our future position. Next, we're going to configure our exclusive gateway. And this is where we're going to configure the rules that determine which branch we are going down. So for our update employee data, if our type of attrition equals transfer, we'll insert, or our type of attrition, here we can select any field available from our forms process. We'll say equals promotion. Insert our variable here. So if our type of attrition equals transfer or the type of attrition equals promotion, we are going to go down our update employee data branch. Our remove employee data, we are going to mark this as our default outflow path. If this condition is not true, we are expecting to go down the remove employee data. However, our rules are going to execute in top-down order. Here we would always be going down the remove employee data path because Forms is going to see this as, yes, this is the default, we're going down this one first. I have not made this mistake many times in my career. Just kidding, I have. So we'll move our remove employee data condition down to the bottom. So Forms will first evaluate our update employee data condition before deciding to remove the employee data. Finally, we can run a Laserfiche workflow service task. And this task is going to run the employee offboarding workflow. Select our workflow, webinar employee offboarding. And if we take a quick look at our workflow definition, we have a very simple workflow that is first going to find our employee folder. And based on the type of attrition, if we are transferring or promoting, we will update the employee metadata employee folder metadata using our field values that we are providing from our input-output parameters. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Otherwise, we'll go down our termination branch, and this will move our employee folder to the HR past employees folder. We could also do additional processing and automation, such as setting the records management event date on our folder. So for example, we can set the event date for the termination of employment to our employment termination date. And that would then instruct Laserfiche Records Management to start the clock. We're going to keep this folder for 7 years, and after 7 years, the folder can then be deleted. or whatever our HR laws for our specific state tell us that we have to do with HR records. If we select anywhere in the background on our workflow designer, we can then edit the workflow properties itself. So we are going to allow this workflow to be started by other processes. This is an important checkbox, or else our workflow will not show up in our workflow name dropdown. And we can also configure our input-output parameters by adding in the different values that we need to pass into this workflow from Laserfiche Forms or another workflow. And these values are then available as tokens within your Laserfiche workflow. Going back to our business process design, we're going to add in all of our input values. So we'll select all of our parameters using our Select All checkbox and select Update. And here we will fill in our inputs from our Laserfiche Forms variables. So we will grab our employee first name, our employee ID, our employee last name, our employment end date, our future department, future position, and our type of attrition. Now that we've completed our offboarding automation, we can save our changes. And it's always a good idea to validate to make sure that there are no validation errors. And finally, we will publish our process here and continue on with testing. So we'll run our process one more time. And this time we are going to pick on Teresa Loy. So we'll enter our employee ID, all of our information pre-fills. We are going to fill out the rest of the information needed. Yes, we will schedule an exit interview because Teresa is going to be retiring. Her last day of work will be August 31st. And she will be missed. If we submit So we will submit all of these. Before we complete our last form, let's go back to our repository and make sure that we have everything we need here in our position management and retirement folder. All of our documents are still coming into our repository. We have our metadata filled in. Everything looks fantastic so far. It's always a good idea to make sure you didn't break everything as you're going through your process. Finally, we are going to submit our knowledge transfer form. And this will then come into our Laserfiche repository. If we go back to our Laserfiche business process design, we can click the manage icon down in the bottom, or I'm sorry, the monitor icon. And this will show us all of our processes that have completed or are currently in progress. If we view our latest instance, we can see here everything has completed so far successfully. Our timer events have been canceled. We haven't waited more than a day for any of our tasks. We can see that our exclusive gateway ran to remove our employee data. Our offboarding workflow has run. And now we need to review the completed checklist by HR. So if we go back to Laserfiche, our Teresa Loy folder should no longer be in active employees, which it no longer is. And we can look in our past employees folder, and there is Teresa Loy, along with all of her position management, retirement documents. So her folder did successfully move. We will run through one more test to make sure that our employee data updates. We'll enter our employee ID. No, no, no. And this is going to be a transfer on the 21st. QA engineer in Department 1. Manager name and no comments. Again, we will complete our tasks here. And when we complete our knowledge transfer form, before we complete this one, we'll take a look at our data here. So we have Joseph Turns, Enterprise Support, and IT. Once we submit our form here, our process is then going to move to, and take a look at our process diagram. We can see our exclusive gateway ran, and this time we're down our update employee data branch. If we look at our employee data again, we can refresh our table. And there's Joseph Turns, QA engineer in Department 1. So we have successfully automated our HR processes here. We'll finish our submission. And again, if we look at our active employees, we have Joseph Turns, Department 1, QA engineer. And we have in our position management, we have our transfer folder with all of our documentation with the template information pre-filled, and a history of our Laserfiche Forms process so we can see exactly what had happened. That's going to conclude the live demonstration of today's webinar. If you do have any questions after today's webinar, there are many resources available, such as Laserfiche Answers, Solutions Exchange, the Laserfiche Support site, and the CDI YouTube channel. Please remember, this webinar will be available within a few days after today, on our YouTube channel, as well as all of our previous webinars. Please feel free to review any of our videos on our YouTube channel, as there is a lot of valuable information. You can also contact us at consulting, sales, or support at citiesdigital.com. Thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Michael Mathis, Solutions Director with CDI, and I will stay on for a while longer to answer any questions that we may have. We have a question: is there an advantage to using a timer catch and email service task over reminders configuration of the user task? If we go to our business process and review our tasks here, there really isn't much of a difference for the purpose of today's webinar of just sending that email. I don't believe we are able to include reminder emails using the default email notification, unless I am missing it. Along with the timer catch event, we could also perform other actions when the timer expires. For example, we could say after 5 days, escalate this to the user's manager, or after 5 days, run a workflow to perform XYZ. Using the timer catch event is going to allow you to execute a lot more than just an email reminder. We have a question: in a self-hosted environment, do we have access to the business process global screen? In self-hosted environments, we do have access to monitor our processes. So if we go to a self-hosted instance here, we can go under our Manage tab, and this will provide us with the same information that is available in Laserfiche Cloud. Eventually. Apparently, I don't have any processes in this self-hosted environment. But yes, this is also available in self-hosted. It's accessed just a little bit differently. I don't see any additional questions coming in the questions area. If there are any questions, again, please don't hesitate to reach out to CDI. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time today and for attending today's webinar. And please join us next month for our August consulting webinar.